Sometimes I wonder if we understand Islam as it should be understood.
Sometimes it's hard to strengthen our faith amidst all these distractions.
Sometimes we're confused about what we want and what our next steps should be.
Sometimes you need to take a moment and reflect on what matters most.
And because we live in such uncertain times with so much going on around us, I guess sometimes we just gotta sit down and talk about it. So there's a very beautiful verse of the Holy Quran that says, وَلِكُلِّ وَجْهَةٌ هُوَ مُوَلِّيهَا فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, that every person has a goal that dominates him, so vie with one another in good works. So something that we as youth need to do is aim for something higher in life. So when we speak about aiming higher in life and setting those high goals, what do we mean?
So I believe students should be setting higher goals, things that are challenging for them, so that I guess the term that we say jihad, the struggle for them, is more fulfilling. And just from my own experience, coming into first year university, I didn't expect to be where I am at now. First year, everybody's a science student, everybody wants to become a doctor. Things didn't work out, and I didn't expect to go through that journey. It was a hard struggle, but things throughout those university years, things you find pathways, things that interest you, and so then you realize that you need an education in certain areas, fields that you like to pursue. And I think Hazur has mentioned that he would like Ahmadi students, whether they're men or women, to pursue higher education, and that just means to sort of climb the ranks of academia. You're in academia, right?
Yeah, so I think with regards to aiming higher in life, I think the main focal point of that whole concept is to not be complacent about being having a regular career, but rather, setting the targets of, being the best surgeon in the world, the best lawyer in the world, having high government positions, whatever the case may be, and not being satisfied with where you are. Just a small example. If you look at, in terms of academia, you look at the top people in the hospitals or any sort of administration. From my own experiences, I see that they come a lot from the Jewish community, and they're disproportionately overrepresented. Although they themselves are not that, there's not many of them, but they're taking they have positions the highest levels of jobs or administration. So I think that being Ahmadi, and having the blessings of Khilafat and the guidance, I think those should be our goals too, that we should be the ones at these seats.
You spoke about post-secondary education and, trying to get as much education as possible, but we find that some youth, they don't even continue after high school. So, in your experience, to those youth who have decided not to pursue post-secondary education of any sort, do you know the reasons why they decided not to continue education? Or
in my opinion, from my observations, is that growing up, they didn't have anyone to turn to in terms of mentorship, and I think mentorship at a young age is real key. I think as kids, we have curiosity, we're innocent, we're a free slate, and so anything that we take in, it'll build on our creativity. And then going through the school system, it's in a way where our creativity skill, our curiosity goes dormant, and so that mentorship is needed for us to sort of cultivate that, navigate the system, and find ways and means to sort of take our skills as kids, because kids have skills. They're not just watching SpongeBob all day. They have things to do. They can do things.
And I think you talked about mentorship and stuff like that. We have Dr. Abdul Salam, who is who had the highest possible achievement in the Nobel Prize, and he was an Ahmadi-Muslim. And I think that we sometimes forget that we're capable of these things. You know what I mean? And I think that if we remind ourselves that with prayers, with sincere efforts, it's definitely possible.
In my opinion, I would say in the West, financial reasons would be why some students or some young youth don't go for post-secondary. We live in a very materialistic society, and you know, your friends around you or the company you have, they have the latest iPhone, they have the latest branded clothing. So from a young age, kids want to have a part-time job to be able to satisfy that because their parents can't afford it. And I think it's very hard to sacrifice that and go study for a few years and not having that cash flow. I think it's difficult. And once you're in there, you know, you've worked here for so long, you've built a reputation, you've built a skill set, and it just keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going until you find it so difficult to go up that you just stay at that level.
Right. So I mean, Huzur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, has urged youth to go into research fields. But when Huzur Anwar says research, what does research entail?
So I'm in mental health research, and I think research entails quite like all across the field. No matter where you go, it requires research, whether it's engineering, computer science, psychology, biology. And so the reason why I believe Huzur is motivating us to go into research is that research is like the backbone of the end product, right? You can't have a finished idea or a finished product without the behind the scenes work. And it's imperative, especially in health medicine, you need like public health specialists to sort of conduct research, and based on the research or the evidence finding, evidence-backed research is how health professionals, for example, make decisions or policies. And so just laying that foundation is instrumental. And sometimes it is that research work which leads an individual to become a Nobel laureate.
I'd just like to follow up on that, and you're very right. I mean, the research pushes, so we are used to having the final product. So we're used to having a phone in our hands. Yeah. But in order to build that phone, there was a lot of individual research, whether it comes to the screen technology, whether it comes to the processing capabilities. I myself am an engineer. All we do is applied science. So any breakthroughs we have in engineering, it's not only the applied, it's the research that goes to it. So nowadays, I read an article in India, we're using waste plastic to do pavement. All this time we've been using, you know, asphalt, and now they're finding a way to reduce waste and do something. So this all comes through research, and it trickles down to people who build it and apply it. But that's why I think why Huzur wanted us to go down that road.
You know, there's a huge gap in what we just spoke about, because you're speaking about research and how it's the backbone, and you know, new discoveries come about with that. But we have youth who are not even aiming close to that. Rather, they're aiming in the opposite direction of not even pursuing education beyond high school, grade 12. So how can we bridge that gap? Like, what would you say to somebody who's deciding not to continue education after high school and who's saying, you know, I can just go into business, you know, my father started a business, or, you know, and just become a driver of some sort, and this is what they're aspiring to do because of, you know, just the society that we live in. There's money that everybody wants. So
I think like kids these days, like if they're not academically inclined, like they don't want to go down the traditional path of being a physician, a lawyer, engineer. I think the main idea is that, okay, if you do not want to go down these things, regardless of what you do, you have to be the best at it. And it's true, you know, every individual may not have the same capacity, intellectual capacity as someone else, but that's no excuse to not strive to achieve, to be the best in whatever, I think, field or expertise you're in. So I think like the main message to every youth should be that whatever you decide to do, it should be with the intentions of really like having influence and using that to leverage and spread Jama'at. And that happens by being the best at whatever you do.
I think you were talking about just being the best at what you do, and like some aren't intellectually inclined. I think that's very relative, and Khuddam are very harsh on themselves. I think they have the capabilities. It just takes work ethic. Like anyone can say they're intelligent, anyone can say they're not intelligent. It's very relative based on your own perception. But no matter what you do, if you put in the hard work, the interest and passion builds. And then rolling off on that, from my observations of what I've seen of individuals who don't excel in further education, I tell them this harsh reality, that if you don't pursue higher education, any job, ordinary job you pick up, you're going to plateau. There's not going to be career growth. You won't be able to build relationships. Networking is key these days, and Khuddam are missing out on building these professional relationships, the career growth. And then when you plateau, you hit a certain like pay grade. And when you can't go higher than that pay grade, and sort of the harsh reality sets in that inflation rises in the country, things are getting more expensive, and then you're short on money, and then what do? And so the harsh reality is that sometimes people navigate the system in trying to find ways and means of making more money, and sometimes it becomes sensitive in the sense that they're walking on the gray area, on the ropes of, is this legal now? Is this illegal? Nowadays, people in the world are committing like tax fraud. They're trying to share that they're having lower income than what they're doing. And so the reason is because if they have the opportunity to pursue and they're not, then the harsh reality sets in. And this is what it is down the road. And this is what I share with Khudam. And this is, for me, a way to illustrate to them that you need to pursue higher education. You need to sacrifice your time. And so in the long term, when you're like 55, you're not struggling for savings. You're actually doing something with your life, and you're building, and even you're growing in training and more career growth.
So maybe youth pursue it because of the short-term benefits, that if we don't go to university, we won't have to pay for the education, we won't have to repay our OSAP, and then at the same time we'll be making money, so we'll have more money in the short term, but they don't think of it in the long term, so they end up living with regret, pretty much. I think one of the very beautiful things about Khilafat Ahmadiyya, and so many youth that I've spoken to who are in university, and they will say, you know, we were confused about what we wanted to do, so we just wrote a letter to Huzur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, and asked him for guidance and prayers. And you know, like usually you'll see the Waqfin know and the Waqfat doing this, but even other youth do it. So I think every young person who's in high school should be writing to Huzur Anwar that this is what we aspire to be, this is what we're confused about, and can Huzur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, please give us some sort of guidance. And a lot of people will say that although it's been difficult for us to pursue this post-secondary education, our life has been blessed, and our memories have been blessed, and our education has been blessed because Huzur Anwar is the one who told us to go in this field. So that's something that I think a lot of people need to remember, that, you know, keeping Khilafat as the central part of our life as youth, and this has a great impact on each and every single one of us.
For sure. There's one other point I wanted to bring up. I would say growing up in our society, there are pressures from parents and families to go into certain fields, and that's not always what the young adult would like, and that causes a lot of difficulties. I mean, if someone is not interested in something, sure, maybe he'll get through it, but the chance that he will not is probably higher. So I think we need to create an environment, or Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya should, where a child can go up and speak and, you know, show his interest and have someone guide him so that he can excel in his interests as well. Not only pursue the common fields, but maybe try something different. In today's day and age, you can be successful at pretty much anything you put your mind to. Yeah. So I think encouraging that creativity, that risk-taking is very important in our society, as opposed to just, okay, you be a doctor, you be an engineer, and so on.
What if somebody's confused about what they would want to do? What are some steps that they can take? I mean, there's people who have already finished their university, finished their undergraduates, masters, PhDs. So those are people that youth can approach and speak to them about, you know, how was the experience? And maybe it's something that they would be inspired to do. A lot of people might not know what they like, right? Like if I was to ask everybody over here, like, look at yourself just 5-7 years ago, what were you interested in? What did you like? As you were saying that, you know, everybody goes into university with this mindset, and then it eventually changes over time. You know, everybody will start off with, you know, the goal of med school, but then, you know, midway through, they're just like, yeah, you know, this isn't for us. So, I mean, if somebody's confused, what can they do? Like, what are some practical things that we can sort of suggest?
Some practical suggestion is that, like, for example, if the Khadim is in grade 12 or has taken the year off, some people do, and that's totally fine, before going to school. My practical advice is that if you don't know anyone, and people at that age, like in grade 12, you have no network, reach out to your guide and just say that, look, I need help in school and I don't know anyone. Your guide would definitely know someone, or do his due diligence into getting you in contact with somebody. And I feel like Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya is so diverse and beautiful in the sense that we're all one large network, and everyone knows someone somewhere. So someone will get in contact with you and can give you information. That goes in part with the mentorship. I myself, as a guide, took a few Khudam to a career fair. They didn't have a transport, but I had the time, and they didn't have a car, and I was willing to support them and seeing that they can clarify their own confusion. So I took them to the career fair. So even navigating like external resources in the community is another way, practical way.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, I think like the Department of Muratalaba is very good in like assigning mentors to students as well. So I think again, like back to what you're saying, that using the Jama'at, leveraging the Jama'at and its resources, it goes a long way in mentorship and career exploration.
The Jama'at has a very good system in place, but I think the point you brought about speaking to the Qaid is the number one thing for any young Khadim, because he might not know. Someone who's in grade 11, grade 12 might not understand the Umar Talba department or how to reach out to the Nazim of that, but everyone knows, or I'd say most Khadims know who their Qaid is, and most Qaids will go out of their way to help any Khadim who's in need. So I'm sure he'll put him in contact with the right person, and then, you know, maybe they'll take it off from there. And if that doesn't work out, sure, you can try a different mentor, because if you aspire to, let's say, be a doctor, and you speak to a doctor and you realize that's not actually what you want to do, they can, you know, refer you to another one, and maybe another field piques your interest, and you take off from there.
And I think at every step of the way, so I mean, we spoke about how somebody can write to Huzur and say that, you know, beloved Huzur, I'm confused about what I want to study, so can Huzur suggest something? And then after he pursues that, if there's any trouble along the way, there's already somebody within Jama'at who's already done that. Yeah. So you can approach somebody. Like I know a lot of a lot of guys who are in university, they'll be reaching out to people who went to the same university but were 4 or 5 years older than them, who already did all the courses, you know, asking them for help, you know, do you have any previous notes that you took, you know, or give me your textbooks or something, because they're too expensive or something. Yeah. But at the same time, there's a lot of people, so every step of the way, there's somebody to help the youth, and that's what the youth might not know. They might be sitting inside their rooms thinking about, okay, you know, I'm finishing high school, I'm going to graduate, and what am I going to do next? I'm so confused. You know, they might be shy about reaching out as well, which is where the Qaid Majlis could sort of take over, right? I mean, so I guess with aiming higher in life, you know, we spoke about how some people are just pursuing the material things of this life. How do we as youth, people who may have been affected by this ourselves growing up, how do we sort of guide youth towards deen and, you know, leaving this material life? Like what can we say to sort of get their mind off of money and more into, you know, achieving those things that, you know, Hazrat Masih Maud Islam and the Khulafa wished for the youth of the Jamaat?
I think our system's so beautiful that no matter where you go, there's always a network or support system, especially when you're at school. If there's no, hopefully all our universities have an AMSA, Ahmadiyya-Muslim Student Association on campus, and if not, there will definitely be a group of Ahmadi students. You'll never be alone. And so I think just keeping in touch with each other and just having these conversations, these dialogue over lunch, or over just walking down the hallway, and just reiterating this fact that, you know, we're in this together, and we have a goal that's greater than us, or we have to give back to our community. And so this idea of giving back and also pursuing a goal that's even greater than us and achieving, I think just reiterating that fact and knowing that we are special as Ahmadi Muslims and that we have a purpose that we need to serve.
And Rabi Sahib, I think like when you stated that question, one thing that came to my mind was, you know, looking at the history of Islam, you know, there was a time where the biggest discoveries, like the hub of knowledge and innovation was in Baghdad, where the early Muslim scientists were literally the thought leaders of the world. And I think that with the renaissance of Ahmadiyya, there has to be like an accompanying renaissance of knowledge and also and thought leaders too. So I think that if we tell Khudam that, you know what, there's a vacuum here where we need innovators, we need people who look like beyond the means of exploration and really try to become experts in all sorts of fields. For example, like algebra, like the things that people struggle with, like, you know, it was invented by a Muslim. Right. Our understanding of optics by a Muslim. So all these rudimentary, fundamental understandings all came from Muslims, and it's at a time now where I think MDs had to be at the forefront of that as well.
And that's something that youth can be very proud of, about the discoveries by Muslim scientists, right? Now there has to be another era in which, inshallah, Ahmadi-Muslim youth are the ones making these sorts of discoveries.
Exactly.
What if somebody was to ask you that, I'm just not capable of going into research, right? Which is, you know, some people know what they're capable of, right? Like, I mean, by the end of high school, you sort of know, okay, am I good at math or am I not good at math? You know, is physics my forte? What's my forte, right? Some people might not have anything. They say, you know, I'm terrible at math. Physics doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Biology, I can't even touch the textbook,
Yeah.
right? So what would you say to somebody who would say that, you know, I'm just not capable of doing it?
I think if you look at just the history of like the monumental discoveries, like one example is like penicillin, like antibiotics, which has saved like millions of lives. Alexander Fleming, the scientist who discovered it, he wasn't going in with the idea of that, you know, I'm gonna fix this. It was just like, you know, serendipitous. It was luck. And also the scientist who discovered benzene, a very special chemical, he thought about it in a dream. So I think that, you know, this is fazl, right? This stuff comes from Allah Ta'ala. Like people who have worked their entire lives towards science and towards the pursuit of science, that comes nothing to Allah's grace, right? So if we have the intentions that we were doing this just for the sake of Allah Ta'ala and for the sake of progressing Jama'at, you know, Allah will take care of the rest. And the best discoveries happen by accident. So,
Exactly.
you know.
And I mean, that's also a principle of the Holy Quran, right? That laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a, that there's nothing for man except for which he strives towards.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, if you don't even take the step towards it, and you give up before even taking that first step, then you won't achieve anything. Otherwise,
It's like that quote: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Right.
So just take a step forward, no matter what direction you go. I mean, I went into university with thinking I'll become a doctor. I came out now going into research and pursuing my master's. And so take a step forward. You gotta like test the ropes. Wherever you get in, navigate the system. You'll find what you like. And so whether that be science, political science, history, you'll find your way. And people have this concrete idea that they'll see themselves like this in 5 years. And then they go through university and they find other interests, and that's totally okay. People are just very hesitant at the moment, and we just want to encourage them that you have that support system. Just take that step wherever it is, and then eventually, through hard work and patience and prayer, you'll end up in a place where you wouldn't have to worry about money, or you don't have to worry about paying the bills.
Right.
All that is through Allah Ta'ala. So you just do your own part, and this is the message that we have to give to them.
So I mean, in your experience, were you guys always, I mean, you're into civil engineering, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So is that what you always wanted to do, or did your plan also change midway? Or
No, I just happened to be pretty good at math and physics, and the engineering field was. So how I looked at it when I was getting out of high school is, I wanted to pick a degree where I could end up in a job market that was doing well. And engineering just seemed to fit with what I had planned. I didn't want to spend too many years in school, so I had to, you know, you have to pick your poison. So I thought engineering would have given me a good package to start my life off at 22 years old. And alhamdulillah, that has worked out pretty well. But I wanted to touch on the point that you mentioned, is some people who are not good at math or not good at physics. It doesn't hurt to try if that's what you're passionate about. But I think we live in a country where you don't necessarily need to go down that road to be successful.
Right.
In a country like Canada, you could do very well being a tradesman. You could do very well in so many different fields, but the thing is, you still need the education for it.
We're just trying to encourage people to aim higher in whatever it is that they think they'll be successful
in. If education is difficult, then there are the means to be successful in I think in this society. It's not true across the globe, but I think in Canada you can really people have a negative connotation when they say go to a college or go to a trade school, but I think you can do very well for yourself, and you can also help the Jama'at in many different ways as well. So we talked about the building a mosque by a few brothers in Regina, I believe. Yeah. So, you know, the more people you get in these trades, the cheaper it will be for the Jama'at, and, you know, that's one way you can also give back, which brings the spiritual aspect into it as well.
Definitely. Khizr, what about yourself? Is this what you always wanted to do, doctor and med school?
It's funny, we talked about like writing to Hazur. So I was very conflicted when I was younger, and like the biggest blessing was Hazur, like instructing me to go into medicine. And it was kind of funny because when I got into undergrad, I always had like quote unquote imposter syndrome. I always felt like, you know, I wasn't meant to go down this path. Everyone's so much smarter than me. Everyone's doing crazy extracurriculars. I'm just here doing vakaramul, right? But alhamdulillah, it works out. You know, like you sacrifice, you pray, and alhamdulillah, like I got accepted into medical school, and that's it. You know, it's all about the blessings of Allah Ta'ala. Yeah.
Shakib, what about yourself?
Yeah, when Hazur came in Canada, I actually wrote a letter to him, and I said that I'm conflicted, and I was conflicted for 2 years. And when I switched, I was still conflicted when I switched my program. I wrote a letter, and I told Hazur that there was these three, I gave Hazur options of 3 things that I really wanted to pursue, and I was interested in, like, based on my skill set and what my passion was. And I listed it for him based on the chronological order, and Hazur picked one out of that list that wasn't the top one. So my reaction at first when I got that letter back was I was not, I would say my jaw dropped because it was jaw dropping, because you come with you call it confirmation bias, hoping Hazur would just pick the one that you like the most. But then for those 2 years up until 2016, I was so nervous whenever I take a test, thinking about my future, stressing so much. And when I got that letter, after my jaw dropped and I took that night, the next day I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I needed. And ever since that day, I haven't thought about, I'm not going to make it. Like, there's never been a point in time where I've second guessed that, will I ever make it to grad school? Because without blessing of Hazur and Hazur setting the goal for you, it makes you strive 2 times greater. And so alhamdulillah, like, that's the path I'm on now, and I'm in the position of applying, and by the grace of Allah that I'll be applying with high distinction. So that's the goal, and afterwards when I get in, inshallah, that'll be the motivation that I'll show Khudam that letter I got in 2016 and the acceptance letter. So that's the motivation.
And I mean, there's so many stories like this of people who have written to Huzur Amr, may Allah be his helper, and they were just set for life. Yeah. So that's what we're encouraging youth to do, that Khilafat-e-Ahmadiyya should be a central point of our lives at every step of the way. This is why Huzur Amr, may Allah be his helper, is giving so much time to youth every single time he visits various countries, so many classes that he has with youth. And Huzur Amr urges and encourages all of us to write letters to him so that we can build that connection. So if we build that connection, then we're set, and then we won't be confused about, should I go to post-secondary, should I not? If there's somebody who is not pursuing post-secondary education after high school, even to them we would say that even then you should write to Huzur and tell Huzur that, Huzur, I don't feel like going to school. What should I do? I'm very conflicted. This is what I want to do. I want to go into trades or business or whatever it is, and let Huzur decide for you. That will be the most blessed and successful life that you'll have. So we had some great points that were discussed today. So Jazakallah for sharing all of those. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jama'at मुझे कुछ कहना है पर है ये शर्त के ज़ात